So one of my favorite quirks of human conversation is when you tell somebody what you do, and they say to you, "That is so great. What is that?" That's usually the response that I get when I tell people I'm a public historian. So what is a public historian? A public historian is someone who practices public history, and public history is the practice of trying to make history more engaging and interesting to the public so that they retain the information and reflect on it and learn from it. And they do this through interpretation. Now, the definition of interpretation that we're going to use today is a teaching technique that combines factual with stimulating explanatory information, and that is from Merriam-Webster Dictionary. After going to theater school for 4 years and deciding I did not want to be a professional actor, I went back to school to get my degree in public history at the University at Albany. There I am right there. And one of the things that I learned about while I was there was Freeman Tilden's 6 principles of interpretation. Freeman Tilden was a conservationist, an interpreter, and a journalist who worked mostly in the 50s and 60s in the framework of the National Park Service. But as I've been reflecting on these 6 principles for about 5 years now, I've really come to realize that you can use these principles in all different fields and disciplines in education. So I'm going to share those with you today in case you might find them useful in your work. First principle, any interpretation that does not somehow relate what is being described or displayed to something within the personality or experience of the visitor will be sterile. You want to take the information and make it, like I said before, interesting to the person who's hearing it, to really tap into something within the personality or the experience of the visitor to make them go, "Hey, I know what that's like, I know what that is." As an example from my own work, when I worked at the Nantucket Historical Association in the Whaling Museum, one of the things that I did was I worked an artifact cart, which had a bunch of different things in it, like pieces of baleen and whale teeth, and diagrams, pictures, that sort of thing, to teach children and adults about the ocean, about whales, about whaling. And one of the things that I told people was that a blue whale is about 2 full-size school buses long. Now, I could have told them, a blue whale is about 100 feet long, but I decided instead to tell them that it was about 2 full-size school buses long because most people have experience with school buses. So they would be able to visualize that, and I got a big wow reaction from a lot of people, especially children at that. Next principle, information as such is not interpretation. Interpretation is revelation based upon information. This basically means that you don't want to just spout a bunch of facts at people. You want to take those facts and find some sort of revelation, some sort of aha moment in the information. To illustrate this, I have a little data analysis from data analyst Alice Zhao. She looked at the years that Taylor Swift's albums came out and the years that her tours happened. And she made the revelation from this information that there was a reason people have such a huge emotional reaction to this tour, and people are so intent on going to see it, because the last tour that Taylor Swift had, and she has always had a tour pretty much after every album that she's released, was in 2018, around then, and she didn't have another tour until about 4 years later, and she released 4 albums in that time. So there was a lot of energy, a lot of excitement built up, which all came out when the Eras tour went up, which includes all of her albums. Next principle, interpretation is an art which combines many arts. Any art is in some way teachable. In 2015, I wrote the play Adele in Berlin, which is the story of a German woman's experience in Berlin right after World War II. And I had this play performed in New York City in 2015, and then it was performed again in the Rochester Fringe Festival in 2023, which was a wonderful experience. And you can see there Miss Cara Fay and Brian Fideli playing those parts. And it went from being just a story, which was actually based on the story of my biological grandmother's life, to being a really important interpretive teaching tool, because I had many people coming up to me after each performance saying, I had no idea that was happening to the German women and that they went through such hardship after the war. And this play, your interpretation, taught me about that. Next principle, the chief aim of interpretation is not instruction, but provocation. You really want to find a way to take the information and make it provocative, make it provoke some sort of visceral or emotional response. It's no wonder that a lot of politicians, a lot of influencers, a lot of salespeople will hit on a sort of touchy topic in order to get a rise out of someone and have them react to their message or believe their message even, or buy their product. Just to give an example of this principle from Freeman Tilden's book, Interpreting Our Heritage, which is where the principles come from, he was talking about an interpreter who was giving this amazing tour of this beautiful natural landscape and really getting everyone in his tour group very invested in the safety of this place and the beauty of this place. And finally, at the very end of the tour, he turned around, looked them in the eye, and said, and with one lit cigarette, you can destroy it all, like that. That is provoking an emotional response, for sure. Number 5, interpretation should aim to present a whole rather than a part, and must address itself to the whole man rather than any phase. Now, the way I kind of see this is that the way to relate to the whole man is to present things as a story, to give your interpretation a theme, because that really, is revealed to be kind of important to the whole man, to have a story or a theme. And one such story I heard recently was at Howe's Caverns in Howe's Cave, New York. Now, our guide told us the story of human impact on the cave, starting from 1842, when the cave was discovered by Lester Howe, and going up until the present. And kind of during that time, there was a lot of human impact on the cave. People were touching the walls, people were chipping off parts of the rocks to take home with them when they would go on tours, people were picnicking on the rocks. Even while we were on the tour, we got to see where they picnicked on the rocks and where candles that they would set on the rocks had put soot stains up on the rocks, and you can still see them today from the 1800s. And this theme and this story was meant to teach us that we needed to preserve the natural beauty and wonder of the cave by keeping human impact extremely low or to nothing. And the last principle, interpretation addressed to children should not be a dilution of the presentations to adults, but should follow a fundamentally different approach. You don't want to take information that you would give to adults and just kind of dumb it down. You want to use concepts and ideas and words that children would understand to get your point across. One of my favorite examples of this is when I was in 8th grade, I was already super interested in World War II, as I am today. And one thing that we were learning about in 8th grade history was island hopping in the Pacific. And we weren't really getting a lot of the sort of facts that our teacher was giving us. And we said, well, what did that look like? What did island hopping look like? And he said, well, I'll show you. And he jumped up on a desk and then jumped across the desks throughout the classroom to show us what island hopping was. And to this day, I have never forgotten the concept of island hopping. Thank you, Mr. Howard, wherever you are. So I like to think of this quote from Interpreting Our Heritage as sort of the why. Why do we do interpretation, in any kind of field or discipline? And now, when you read this, Tilden was operating very much within the framework of conservation, of course, in the National Park Service. But like I said, think of your field or your discipline that you work in and think about how this could kind of work in that framework. Through interpretation, understanding, through understanding, appreciation, through appreciation, protection. And my interpretation of that information is receiving interpretations of science, nature, history, philosophical ideas, art, or really anything else, or doing the interpreting ourselves, nurtures our creative and intellectual faculties, protects them from stagnation, and fosters innovation. Thank you.